The microphone squealed. All eyes were on Marcus Thorne, a man who had everything. His new wife Seraphina dripped in diamonds, sneering at the woman in the simple dress. "Darling, is that her?" Marcus laughed, a cruel, booming sound. "That's Clara, my ex. Don't worry, she's nothing." But as he spoke, the most powerful man in the room, the reclusive billionaire Julian Croft, turned. He silenced the entire gala, put his hand on Clara's back, and said to the world, "Mr. Thorne, you're mistaken. This is the woman I've waited for." The hum of the servers in Clara Hayes's tiny home office was her only consistent companion. It was a low, steady thrum against the backdrop of her small, overly beige condo, the one tangible asset she had walked away with. The rest of her life had been systematically, legally, and spiritually liquidated. On her monitor, a complex data matrix shimmered. It was a problem for a shipping conglomerate in Singapore, a logistics puzzle she was solving for 400. She was doing it under her pseudonym, C.H. Arden. C.H. Arden was reliable. C.H. Arden was brilliant in a quiet, uncredited way. C.H. Arden was above all invisible. Clara Hayes, the woman who had drawn the architecture for Project Chimera on a cocktail napkin in a dark bar, was a ghost. Her phone buzzed, vibrating across the desk. It was Chloe. "You're ignoring me." Chloe's voice said no hello needed. "I'm working, Chloe." Clara murmured, her eyes still scanning code. "No, you're hiding. And you're not allowed to tonight. The car is picking you up in 1 hour. I'm already at the Astoria." Clara's stomach dropped. "Chloe, I can't. It's his night. The gala. He's the guest of honor." "I know." Chloe snapped, the sound of her friend applying lipstick audible over the line. Chloe Benson was a bulldog of a tech journalist for the San Francisco Chronicle, and Clara's only remaining bridge to the world she had once been poised to conquer. "That's why you're coming. I'm covering this farce, and I'm not doing it alone. You are my +1. Your press. You'll be invisible, I promise. Just be in the room." "Why are you doing this to me?" Clara whispered. There was a pause. When Chloe spoke again, her voice was softer but laced with a frustrated fire. "Because, Clara, it's been 5 years. 5 years of you diminishing. You're living in a shoebox taking scraps while that vampire is getting the Innovator of the Decade award tonight for your work. I don't want you to network. I don't want you to make a scene. I want you to stand in that ballroom, look at what he built on your bones, and I want you to get angry again." An hour later, Clara was standing in front of her full-length mirror, horrified. The dress Chloe had sent over a simple midnight blue sheath by a designer Clara couldn't afford felt like a costume. It was elegant, but it was armor she hadn't worn in years. The Astoria Grand Ballroom was another world. It was a galaxy of noise and light, a symphony of consolidated wealth. Chandeliers like captured supernovas dripped crystals from the ceiling. Ice sculptures of mythical creatures melted elegantly onto beds of caviar. The air was thick with the scent of hothouse flowers and $100 perfume. Clara felt like a forgery. Her press pass reading, "Clara Hayes, Guest SF Chronicle," felt heavy on her chest. "Just stay by me. Observe. Take notes. Be my second set of eyes," Chloe instructed, grabbing 2 glasses of champagne and pressing one into Clara's cold hand. Chloe was in her element, her eyes scanning the room, her short cropped hair and sharp-shouldered blazer a stark contrast to the flowing gowns. Clara tried. She sipped the champagne and tried to look professional. She tried to see the room as a journalist, a collection of data points, stockbrokers, venture capitalists, socialites. But it was all just a blur, until she heard his laugh. It was the same laugh, that big booming baritone that could charm a room or gut an opponent. It cut through the orchestra, through the hundreds of conversations, and hit her straight in the solar plexus. She hadn't heard it in person in 5 years, but her body remembered it. Her heart hammered. Her palms grew damp. She turned slowly, dreading it. He was there. Marcus Thorne, her ex-husband. He looked like a king, his tuxedo tailored by hands that charged more than her monthly mortgage. He was taller in her memory, but his presence was just as large. He was surrounded a circle of sycophants laughing at a story he was telling, and on his arm was Seraphina. Clara had only seen her in Vogue. Seraphina de Winterthorne, an heiress who had inherited a railroad and a new face. In person she was less a person and more a concept. She was carved from ice poured into a dress that seemed woven from diamonds, and her eyes, cold and blue, swept the room with a look of profound imperial boredom. "Don't look," Chloe muttered, seeing Clara freeze. "He's not... Clara, don't." But it was too late. He wasn't looking. She was. Seraphina's gaze, sweeping the room for competition, snagged on Clara. Her eyes narrowed. She saw Clara's simple dress, the press past the way she was hiding behind a pillar. Seraphina leaned in and whispered something in Marcus's ear. He paused, annoyed at the interruption, and followed her gaze. He saw her. His eyes, the ones that had once looked at her with adoration across a pile of blueprints, scanned her with cold, dismissive appraisal. He didn't look shocked. He didn't look angry. He looked amused. He gave her a small, tight nod. A nod one gives to a valet. And then he turned his back. The dismissal was so total, so absolute, that Clara felt the air leave her lungs. It was worse than being yelled at. It was being erased. "That's it," Clara whispered, her voice shaking. "I'm going." "Clara, wait." "No, Chloe. You were wrong. This doesn't make me angry. It makes me sick. I'll see you at home." She turned and fled, pushing her way through the glittering crowd, desperate for an exit. She wasn't going to cry. She wasn't. She just needed air. Clara was shouldering her way toward the grand lobby, her eyes stinging, when a hand on her arm stopped her. It wasn't Chloe. It was a man in a tuxedo, a bodyguard by the looks of him, but his grip was polite. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but this section is for—" "Oh, Ms. Hayes." Clara turned. It was Benjamin Marcus's longtime head of security. He looked at her with pity. "It's good to see you, ma'am." "Ben," she nodded, trying to pull her arm free. "I was just leaving." "Of course. Let me just—" But the polite interaction had caused a bottleneck. People had stopped, and the small disturbance had drawn the one group of people she was trying to escape. "Well, well, well," said a voice like shattered glass. Seraphina de Winterthorne had detached herself from her husband, drifting toward Clara with a predator's grace. "Look, Marcus. It's the little ghost of relationships past." Marcus was right behind her, his face a mask of social charm, but his eyes were hard. "Clara, what a surprise. I didn't know you were still in the city." "I was just going—" Clara said, her voice tight. She tried to move around them. Seraphina blocked her path, a small, cruel smile playing on her perfect crimson lips. She looked Clara up and down, a theatrical, insulting appraisal. "Darling, is that dress—" "Rented. You must let me know where. I'm always looking for a good charity to support." A few people in their circle tittered. "Seraphina," Marcus said, his voice a low warning. Not for her, Clara knew, for the optics. "What?" Seraphina said, feigning innocence. "I'm just surprised. I heard you were academic. I've always thought it so tragic when a woman lets herself go for a career and then, well, ends up losing both." Clara's face was white. She could feel the stares. She could see Chloe fighting her way through the crowd, her face a mask of thunder. "That's enough," Clara said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Is it?" Seraphina challenged. "I don't think it is. I think you're pathetic, hanging around the edges of his party. What did you think, that he'd see you and what, realize he'd made a mistake? Look at me, darling." She splayed a hand glittering with a diamond the size of a quail's egg on Marcus's chest. "And then look at you. He upgraded." This was it. The moment of total public annihilation. Marcus, seeing his investors watching, seeing the potential for a scene, decided to take control. He put a hand on Serafina's arm, but he spoke at Clara. "Now let's all be adults," he said, his voice projecting for the group. He was performing. "Clara, it's quaint that you're here, really. But Serafina has a point. You're out of your depth." An investor, a man named Henderson, piped up, "Marcus, who is this, an old intern?" Marcus laughed, the big booming laugh. This is Clara, my ex-wife, my first wife, from before." He gestured at the entire opulent room. "Before all this." He leaned in as if sharing a corporate secret, but his voice was loud. It was a speech. "People ask me about her sometimes, you know. They remember her from the early days back when we were just starting. What happened to Clara, they ask. She was so smart, and I have to tell them the truth." He looked directly at Clara, his eyes devoid of any warmth. "I tell them she was a brilliant technician, a mechanic. But she had no vision, no killer instinct. She couldn't see the big picture. She was, and I mean this with all the respect in the world, a wonderful starter wife." The laughter was sycophantic, cruel. "I tell them," he continued, his voice dropping for the kill, "not to worry about her. She's fine. She's happy, in her own little way. But as a force, as a partner, as a name in this industry." He paused, sweeping the room, savoring the moment. She was nothing. The word. His favorite word for her. The word from the divorce. The word that had defined her for 5 years. It hung in the air, glittering and venomous. The crowd, sensing the blood, was silent. Clara just stood there, her body vibrating with a cold, silent rage that was so profound it felt like stillness. "Clara!" Chloe had finally arrived, pushing past Serafina. "We're leaving. Now!" Chloe grabbed her arm and began to pull her away. Clara went her legs wooden. She didn't look back. She could feel the hundreds of eyes on her, the whispers starting up like a nest of snakes. She was the nothing, the starter wife, the ghost at the feast. As Chloe dragged her toward the exit, she didn't see the man standing in the shadows of the grand staircase, his face unreadable, his steel-gray eyes following her every move. He had watched the entire brutal exchange, and he hadn't moved a muscle. Clara didn't stop until she was outside on a secluded terrace overlooking the city's twinkling grid. The November air was a welcome slap, sharp and cold, cutting through the fog of her humiliation. She ripped the press pass off her neck and hurled it into a nearby ornamental shrub. "I'm going to kill him." Chloe was pacing her phone in her hand. "I'm going to write an exposé. I'm going to—" "Clara, say something." "He won." Clara whispered, her voice hollow. She gripped the cold stone balustrade. "That's what he does. He wins. He takes, and he wins." Nothing. The word echoed, transporting her back 5 years to a different room, a different kind of execution. The lawyer's office. Polished mahogany, beige walls, the smell of old money and stale coffee. His name was Alistair Finch. Marcus sat opposite her, not looking at her. Just at the documents. "Clara, be reasonable," Finch had said, his voice a dry rustle. "Thorne Industries is offering a, frankly, staggering settlement for a marriage of this length. He's being more than generous." "I don't want the settlement." Clara had whispered, the stack of papers a blurry wall between her and her husband. "I want my name. On the patent. On Project Chimera." Marcus had sighed, a sound of profound exasperation. "Clara, we've been over this. You're a brilliant coder. The best. But you don't understand business. You wrote some algorithms. I built the company. I got the funding. I created the brand. The code. Clara, the code is just lines. It's the vision that matters." "It was my vision. she'd cried, the tears finally coming. The self-correcting data matrix. It was my thesis. I drew the whole thing for you on a napkin at the Tipsy Monk. And you were a broke PhD student. He'd snapped, the charm vanishing. I gave you a platform. I gave you resources. What did you give me? You can't even walk into a room and command it. You hide. You're not a partner, Clara. You're a mechanic. A very good one. But people don't put the mechanic's name on the front of the Ferrari. Then he had slid the last document across the table. The non-disclosure agreement. It wasn't a page, it was a book. It wasn't just about the company. It was about him. It was about them. It barred her from working in any related field, data architecture, predictive analytics, AI, for 10 years. What is this? She'd asked, her blood turning to ice. Protection, Finch had said. For Mr. Thorne's intellectual property. It's my property. Clara. Marcus said, his voice soft, and that was so much worse. Please, don't fight me. I will, she'd said, standing up. I'll take you to court. I'll show them my thesis. I'll show them the server logs. Alistair Finch had coughed a small, polite sound. Ms. Hayes, if you choose to litigate, we will of course be forced to countersue. We will be forced to interrogate your time at the company. Your husband, he gestured to Marcus, is prepared to testify that you were unstable, that your work was erratic. What? She looked at Marcus, horrified. You were stressed, Clara. Marcus said, his eyes full of false pity. The pressure. You were seeing Dr. Evans, weren't you? For anxiety, her therapy, her private fears of not being good enough. He was going to use that against her. He will paint you as hysterical Ms. Hayes. Finch said, his voice flat. He will use your medical records. He will testify that he fixed your erratic code. Who do you think a judge will believe, the celebrated CEO of Thorne Industries, or the emotional ex-wife? He'd given her the pen. Sign, and you walk away with your condo and your dignity. Fight, and you lose both. She had signed. She had signed away her name, her work, her future. She had taken the settlement and disappeared. She had become C.H. Arden. She had become nothing. Back on the terrace, the memory was so vivid she was shaking. He's about to give his keynote, Chloe said, her voice bitter. He's getting an award. Life is just screamingly unfair. I should just go, Clara said, pulling her coat tighter. She was so cold. I'll get an Uber. A brutal piece of theater. The voice came from the shadows at the far end of the terrace. Clara and Chloe both jumped. A man stepped into the dim light. He was tall, dressed in a tuxedo so perfectly tailored, it looked more like an extension of him than a suit. He was lean, with sharp features and the most intelligent, unsettling gray eyes Clara had ever seen. He wasn't holding a drink. He was just watching. I'm sorry, Clara stammered. We didn't see you. We'll go. You don't have to, the man said. His voice was quiet, with a faint, unplaceable European accent. He's the one who should go. Marcus Thorne is a parasite in a good suit. Chloe, ever the journalist, stepped forward. I'm Chloe Benson, SF Chronicle, and you are. The man's eyes didn't leave Clara. Julian Croft. Chloe's jaw dropped. Julian Croft, the Quantum King, the founder of Ethelred Labs, the most reclusive, powerful, and genuinely brilliant man in technology. He was the real guest of honor. He was the man Marcus was supposedly partnering with. Chloe was speechless. I'm late, Julian said, a brief, thin smile. I detest these things. All posturing, no substance. I was waiting for the right moment to make my appearance. He took a step toward Clara. Are you all right, Ms. Hayes? Clara was stunned. You know who I am. I do, he said, though I confess I've spent the last 18 months looking for a ghost. I don't understand? You wouldn't, he said. He was very thorough, but you're not Ms. Hayes to me. Not really. He stepped closer, his gaze so intense it was like a physical force. You're C.H. Arden. Clara's blood didn't just run cold, it froze. The name, her secret, her one tiny protected space. How? She breathed, taking an involuntary step back. Chloe looked utterly bewildered. How do I know? Julian Croft finished. Because I've been trying to hire C.H. Arden for a year. Do you have any idea how much money you've cost me, Ms. Hayes? What? You can't leave, Julian said as Clara instinctively turned to flee. Please, I've spent over $6 million in 18 months of my life trying to find you. He gestured to the city lights, a billion data points shining below them. I run a small passion project, a recruitment platform disguised as a coding competition. We call it the Crucible. It's where we test our most advanced quantum problems. It's impossible. By design. Clara knew it. The Crucible. The problems were so beautiful, so complex. They were the only things that made her feel alive. For 2 years, Julian continued, no one has solved the labyrinth challenge. It's a scalability problem, a theoretical monster. My own PhDs at Ethelred, the best minds in the world, haven't been able to crack it. Then 6 months ago, C.H. Arden solved it, in a weekend, for a prize of $5,000. He laughed a dry, incredulous sound. I upped the prize. I posted the Hydra problem. You solved it in 72 hours. Then the Minotaur, 48. I like puzzles, Clara whispered, her mind reeling. These aren't puzzles, Ms. Hayes, Julian said, his voice dropping. They are the keys to the kingdom, and the signature, your coding style. It was familiar. I couldn't place it, but it was elegant, aggressive, impossible. It haunted me. He paused, his eyes scanning her face. At the same time, my M&A team was vetting an acquisition, Thorn Industries. Clara flinched. Exactly, Julian said. Ethelred is expanding. We were looking to acquire a new data management division. Thorn Industries was the market leader, but I looked at the code. Chimera. He looked disgusted. It was a masterpiece, a Ferrari engine, but it was trapped in a go-kart. He'd bolted on cheap, ugly user interfaces. He'd bastardized it. The core was brilliant, but it was suffocating. It hadn't been updated in 5 years. It was crying out for help. He doesn't understand it, Clara said, the words torn from her. He never did. No, he didn't, Julian agreed. But as my team ran the deep diagnostic, we found artifacts, fragments of code, metadata he'd been too stupid to scrub, and a digital fingerprint. He looked right at her. It was the same fingerprint as C.H. Arden, the same impossible elegance. He had started a search. He traced the code fragments, the original metadata, to an MIT server, to a doctoral thesis. Project Chimera, a self-correcting data matrix, by Clara Hayes. And then, Julian said, you vanished. Your academic records were sealed. Your professional footprint was erased. It was a brilliant, terrifying piece of legal and social sabotage. He didn't just divorce you. He deleted you. He had a good lawyer, Clara said, her voice trembling. He had Alistair Finch, Julian corrected. And you had no one. Until C.H. Arden reappeared on the Crucible, I put it all together. I've been trying to find you ever since. I had to see the mind that could build such a thing. So, you came here, Clara said, gesturing to the party, to buy his company. I came here to poach his one decent asset, Julian corrected. I came here for you. I came here to see if the woman I'd found online had the courage to match her intellect. He gestured back toward the ballroom. After what I just saw, the way you stood your ground, the way you didn't crumble, you solidified. I have my answer. It doesn't matter, Clara said, the fight draining out of her. It's just talk. The NDA. It's ironclad. He'll destroy me. He'll use the hysteria clause, Julian said, his voice laced with venom. The threats against your medical records. Yes, I know. It's a terrifying document. My lawyers have had a copy for 6 weeks. They called it a masterpiece of legal terrorism. Then I can't do anything. On the contrary, Julian said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. You can do everything. That masterpiece, it's now worthless. What? How you said it's ironclad. It was, Julian said. But that kind of contract, a contract of total suppression, relies on one thing: mutual adherence. He broke it. Clara stared. What do you mean? The NDA included a mutual non-disparagement clause. You couldn't talk about him, and he couldn't talk about you. 10 minutes ago, Mr. Thorne stood in front of 300 people, including your friend Ms. Benson of the Chronicle, and publicly viciously disparaged you. He called you nothing. He called you a footnote. In doing so, he invalidated the entire contract. He just handed you the gun, Clara. Clara's knees felt weak. Chloe, who had been listening with her mouth open, let out a small squeak. He set me free. He set you free, Julian confirmed. He's monumentally stupid. A new, unfamiliar fire was surging through Clara's veins. It wasn't the cold, helpless rage of before. It was hot. It was focused. It was power. So, what now? Clara asked, her voice shaking but not with fear. Now, Julian said, checking his watch, your ex-husband is about to walk onto the stage to accept his Innovator of the Decade award. He's going to give a keynote, and in that keynote he's going to use your work to beg for my money. He looked at her. I'd rather he beg for your mercy. I don't know what to do, Clara said. You don't have to do anything but walk, Julian said. My team, they've been busy. He turned to Chloe. Ms. Benson, you're a friend. I'm her best friend, Chloe said, her eyes alight. What do you need? Are you recording? I'm always recording, Chloe said, tapping the phone in her breast pocket. Good, Julian said. Keep it on. But I have something better. He pulled a small, sleek object from his pocket, a digital audio recorder. My head of security, he's also very good. He's been Mr. Thorne's shadow for the last hour. This has the entire starter wife conversation on it crystal clear. For posterity. Clara's eyes widened. But the NDA? Even if he broke it, what about Finch? The threats. Ah, yes, the duress, Julian said. Hard to prove, your word against his. Except, it's not. What do you mean? My team is persuasive, Julian said. It turns out Mr. Alistair Finch has a complicated personal life and a very expensive habit. My people didn't blackmail him. We just offered him a better deal, a much better one. A golden parachute into a very comfortable, very early retirement in a country with no extradition. What did he give you? Clara breathed. Everything, Julian said. A sworn affidavit, memos, emails. But we're not even going to need them. We have something better. Clara was confused. What's better than an affidavit from his own lawyer? Julian smiled. A recording from your lawyer. You. He was looking at her. Wait, you don't mean? I do, Julian said. My team searched for any leverage. We dug into your old accounts, your cloud backups, the things you forgot you even had. You recorded the final divorce meeting, didn't you, Clara? On your old phone. Clara's blood turned to ice. She had. She had been so terrified, so alone. She'd pressed record on her phone in her lap just so she would have a memory of what he'd said. She'd forgotten. She'd thrown that phone in a drawer. "We found the audio file," Julian said, his voice soft. "It was encrypted, but we have good people." He pulled out a simple black USB drive. "It's all right here. The audio of Alistair Finch threatening to use your medical records. The sound of Marcus agreeing. The hysterical clause. It's devastating. And as of 10 minutes ago, completely admissible." He held it out to her. "This is your choice, Clara. We can walk away. I can give you a job at Ethelred. You can be C.H. Arden and no one will ever know. You'll be rich. You'll be safe." He looked her in the eyes. "Or, you can take this. You can walk back into that ballroom and you can burn his entire fraudulent world to the absolute ground." Clara looked at the USB drive. It was her past, her pain, her prison, and her key. She looked at Chloe, who was vibrating with a silent primal scream. She looked at Julian, whose gray eyes were not offering pity but respect. "He called me nothing," she said, her voice a razor. She took the USB drive from his hand. "Let's go." Julian Croft smiled. It transformed his face, chasing away the shadows. "One more thing," he said. He tapped an earpiece so small Clara hadn't even seen it. "My team just cut the main feed to the ballroom's AV system. They're experiencing technical difficulties. The only thing that will play on that big screen is what's on this drive. And Ms. Benson," he looked at Chloe, "the AV booth is in the back left. The tech's name is Michael. He's one of my people. Give him this." He handed her a small encrypted hard drive. "It's a mirror of the USB. He'll know what to do." "On it," Chloe said, her eyes gleaming. She slipped the drive into her pocket, gave Clara a fierce hug, and melted back into the shadows. A journalist on the scent of the story of her life. Julian offered his arm. "Shall we, Ms. Hayes? I believe you're on." Clara Hayes, the woman who had been a ghost for 5 years, took his arm. "Let's give them a show." The walk from the terrace to the main ballroom was the longest 10 yards of Clara's life, but this time she wasn't fleeing. She was advancing. With her hand on Julian Croft's arm, the sea of people parted. The energy in the room shifted. The whispers didn't stop. They changed. They were no longer about her, the pathetic ex. They were about him and the mystery woman on his arm. "Who is that? Is that his new girlfriend? She doesn't look like a model." "He looks furious." Clara kept her eyes forward. She could feel the heat of 100 stares, but the only one that mattered was Julian's calm, steady presence beside her. He guided her not to a back row seat, but directly toward the front, to the main table, reserved for the guest of honor, right at the foot of the stage. Marcus was at the podium, basking in the spotlight. He had his award in his hand. He was in his element, his voice smooth and hypnotic, weaving a tale of innovation and success. "And that's what Thorne Industries has always been about," he was saying, his arms spread wide. "The future. We don't just predict the future. We build it. Our flagship project Chimera isn't just software. It's the new operating system for a new world. And I'm thrilled to announce that we are in final talks for a partnership that will take us, truly, to the next level." He saw them then. His flow faltered. He stopped mid-sentence, his eyes locked on Julian Croft. A massive, relieved smile spread across his face. "Ah, and here he is," Marcus boomed, recovering. "The man himself, the visionary. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my friend, my colleague, the future of tech, Dr. Julian Croft." The room erupted in applause. A spotlight operator swung a light onto Julian and Clara, bathing them in white. Julian did not smile. He did not clap. He simply guided Clara to the table, and in a gesture of deliberate old-world chivalry, pulled out her chair for her. Marcus, still on stage, faltered again. This wasn't the script. Julian was supposed to come up, shake his hand, and endorse him. "Julian," Marcus called out, his smile straining. "Come on up and... I see you've... found..." His eyes finally landed on Clara, and this time he saw her. He saw her sitting at the head table. He saw her hand on Julian Croft's arm. He saw the way Julian had pulled her chair out. And his brain, so quick to calculate profit and loss, simply could not compute this variable. The silence stretched. Serafina, sitting at the table, was the first to react. Her face, a mask of bored beauty, twisted into genuine ugly confusion. What is she doing here?" she hissed loud enough for the table to hear. This is the VIP table security, Julian Croft, who had been in the process of sitting straightened. He turned not to Marcus on the stage, but to Serafina. His voice was not loud, but it was so cold, so precise that it cut through all the whispers. "She is here," Julian said, his eyes locking on Serafina's, "because she is my guest." Marcus on stage was now visibly sweating. The crowd was murmuring. This was a disaster. He had to regain control. He laughed his big, false laugh. "Julian, my friend, always the maverick," he said, walking off the stage, microphone in hand, toward the table. He was trying to make it part of the show. "I see you've already met my ex-wife, Clara. Small world, isn't it?" He was standing in front of them now. He clapped Julian on the shoulder, a desperate alpha male gesture. "Julian, a pleasure. I'm so glad we can finally talk partnership, and I see you've met Clara. She used to be a great support back in the day. As I mentioned," he winked at the investors at the table, "a footnote." This was it, the pivot point. Clara felt Julian's hand on the back of her chair, a silent, steadying pressure. Serafina, emboldened by her husband's presence, stood up. "Marcus, darling, the help is back, and she brought a friend. This is embarrassing." "She's right, Marcus," the investor, Henderson, grumbled. "What is this? This is unprofessional." Marcus, flustered, turned to Julian. "Julian, I'm so sorry. She's clearly unstable. She cornered you, I'm sure." This was when Julian Croft moved. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He simply took the microphone from Marcus's limp hand. The feedback squealed for a second, silencing the room. Julian tapped it once. "Mr. Thorne," Julian said. His voice, now amplified, was a soft, dangerous purr. "Thank you for that introduction, and thank you especially for that last comment." He turned not just to Marcus, but to the entire room, to the press, to the investors, to the world. "I came here tonight to see an architect. I was told I would find her here. I was not disappointed." He turned back to Marcus. "You call this woman nothing. You call her a footnote. You are, Mr. Thorne, catastrophically mistaken." He turned, put his hand on the small of Clara's back, a gesture of both protection and presentation. "Your ex-wife," Julian said. "That's fascinating, because to me..." He looked at Clara and then at the stunned crowd. "To me, this is Clara Hayes, and she is the woman I've waited for." The click-whir flash of a dozen press cameras was deafening in the silence. It was the sound of a narrative being rewritten. Marcus Thorne's face was a grotesque mask of confusion. The blood had drained from it, leaving a pasty grayish-white sheen under the spotlights. Waited for..." Marcus stammered, the microphone amplifying his sudden insecurity. Like a date, Julian, you old dog, you didn't tell me you were..." Julian Croft let out a short, sharp laugh. It was not a sound of mirth. "A date? No, Mr. Thorne. I am not a dog, and Ms. Hayes is not a prize. I've been waiting in the way an astronomer waits for a comet. I have been waiting for the mind." He turned to Clara. "Clara, would you do me the honor?" Clara stood. Her legs were shaking, but she locked her knees. She looked for the first time in 5 years directly into Marcus Thorne's eyes, and she saw for the first time not the monster who had broken her, but a small, terrified man. "Mr. Thorne," she said. Her voice was quiet, but in the tomb-like silence of the ballroom it carried. "Marcus," she said louder. "You said Project Chimera was your vision." It is," he sputtered. I built it. I wrote it," Clara said. "Every single line." You're lying," he shrieked, his composure shattering. "She's lying! The NDA! You can't... This is slander security. Get her out of here." "The NDA," Julian said, his voice dripping with amusement. "The one you voided 10 minutes ago with your starter wife speech. The one you are as we speak in total breach of... That's not true." "Chloe!" Clara called out. In the back of the room, Chloe gave a thumbs up from the AV booth. "Mr. Thorne," Clara said, her voice full of a terrible calm power. "You and your lawyer, Mr. Alistair Finch. You threatened to use my medical records against me. You called me hysterical. You threatened to destroy me. Lies, all lies." Marcus screamed, his face a blotchy red. "Prove it." "Okay," Clara said. She nodded to the AV booth. The massive screen behind the stage, which had been displaying the Thorne Industries logo, flickered and went black. The ballroom was plunged into near darkness save for the spotlights on the stage. And then, a voice. Alistair Finch's dry, rustling voice filling the grand ballroom. "Paint you as hysterical Ms. Hayes. He will use your medical records. He will testify that he fixed your erratic code." It was the recording. Her recording. The room was so quiet the clink of an ice cube in a glass sounded like a gunshot. Marcus's voice came next, full of false pity. "Stressed, Clara. The pressure. You were seeing Dr. Evans, weren't you? For anxiety." Then Finch again. "Sign and you walk away with your condo and your dignity. Fight, and you lose both." The audio clicked off. The house lights came up not on the glittering party but on a morgue. Marcus Thorne was a statue. He was completely, utterly broken. He looked at Clara, his eyes wide with a new, horrifying respect. "Clara, please, you don't know what you're doing. You'll destroy the company. Our company." "It was never our company, Marcus," Clara said. "It was my work and your lie, and the lie is over." Serafina was the first to move. With a look of absolute concentrated fury, she stared at Marcus. Slap! The sound cracked through the room. She hit him open-palmed across the face. You fraud!" she spat. "You told me she was a secretary. You told me you were a genius. You tied me to nothing." She ripped the massive diamond ring from her finger and threw it not at him but at his feet. "My lawyers will be calling your lawyers. I'm not going down with you." She grabbed her clutch and stormed out, pushing a cameraman out of her way. Investors were running, not walking running. Men in $10,000 suits were scrambling for the exits, their faces pale, their phones pressed to their ears. Sell all of it. Dump it. I don't care about the loss. Just get me out." "It's a complete fraud. The whole thing's a lie. Get me legal on the phone. We're suing for gross misrepresentation. The SEC. Call the SEC." Julian Croft calmly took the microphone. "A note for those of you from the press," Julian said. "Ethelred Labs is announcing a $10 billion seed fund to launch a new competing venture. A venture based on actual innovation. A venture led by the true architect of this technology." He raised his glass to Clara. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder and CEO of Ethelred Core, Ms. Clara Hayes." He offered her his hand not as a lover but as a partner. He guided her through the pandemonium away from Marcus and toward the stage. He didn't take the podium. He stepped to the side and gestured for her to take it. Clara Hayes, the woman who had been nothing, walked past her ex-husband, stepped onto the stage, and stood in the center of the spotlight. It was warm, it was bright, and it felt like home. The next morning at 10 a.m., Clara stood in a sterile, glass-walled boardroom on the 50th floor of the Ethelred Labs building. The temporary logo for Ethelred Core was projected on a screen behind her. The room was packed. Chloe, who had filed her story at 4 a.m., a story that had already broken the Chronicle's website, was in the front row, grinning. Julian Croft was also in the front row, but deliberately off to the side. This was her stage. Clara herself was transformed. Julian's team had descended on her condo at dawn, not with suggestions, but with solutions. She was now wearing a custom-tailored suit in a shade of dark teal. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek professional style, and she wore a simple earpiece. She looked in charge. "Ms. Hayes," a reporter from the Wall Street Journal called out, "can you confirm the SEC has opened an investigation into Thorne Industries as of 8 a.m. this morning?" Clara tapped the microphone. Her voice was steady. "I can confirm that my team and I are cooperating fully with all relevant authorities. My focus, however, is not on the past. It's on the future." "Ms. Hayes, what's your response to Mr. Thorne's only statement calling you a bitter, vindictive woman who stole his work?" Clara allowed herself a small, sad smile. "My work is my response. Mr. Thorne and I have a fundamental disagreement. He believes that ideas are vision. I believe that ideas are worthless without execution. He was the vision. I was the execution." "Ms. Hayes," another reporter shouted, "what is Ethelred Core? What is Project Ethelred, which you mentioned last night?" This was it. Clara clicked a remote in her hand. The screen behind her, which had been displaying the logo, flickered. A swirling, beautiful, and terrifyingly complex nebula of data appeared. "For 5 years," Clara began, "Thorne Industries has been selling you Project Chimera. It was my doctoral thesis. It's brilliant, but it's a child's drawing. It was the blueprint. For the last 5 years, while Mr. Thorne was busy selling, I was busy building." She gestured to the screen. "Chimera can sort and organize data. Project Ethelred, it understands data. It doesn't just predict, it intuits. It models. Chimera can tell you what happened. Ethelred can tell you why it happened, and what will happen next." The room was silent. "Mr. Thorne sold you a fast car," Clara said, her voice ringing with passion. "I am offering you a warp drive. Ethelred Core isn't a data management company. It's a wisdom engine. It can map genetic sequences in seconds. It can model climate change solutions that are actually viable. It can predict with 99.8% accuracy the failure points in a national power grid before they happen." A final question came from the back. "Mr. Thorne always said you were the support. You were the footnote. What does it feel like to be the one in charge?" Clara looked at the reporter. She thought about the word nothing. "I was never support," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I was the foundation, the invisible architecture that held the entire building up. The only difference is now. You can see me." 6 months later, Clara was on the cover of Wired. The headline, "The Architect Clara Hayes Rebuilds the World." Her office at Ethelred Core was nothing like her old condo. It was minimalist, clean, and powerful, with a floor-to-ceiling view of the city. Project Ethelred had already landed its first 2 clients, NASA and the World Health Organization. There was a soft knock on her door. Julian Croft leaned in. "Madam CEO," he said, a small smile on his face. "You have a visitor. He doesn't have an appointment, but he said you'd see him." Clara looked up from her terminal. "Who?" Julian stepped aside, and a security guard escorted a man into her office. He was diminished, gray, thinner. The suit was expensive, but it hung on him. It was Marcus. He was out on bail. The trial was next month. He had lost everything. The SEC had frozen his assets. Serafina's divorce was set to take the rest. "Clara," he said, his voice raspy. "Marcus," Clara said. Her voice was neutral. Not cold, not warm. Just a fact. "You have 5 minutes." The security guard stepped back but kept his hand on the door. I just wanted to see you," he said, looking around the office. This is impressive." "It is," she agreed. I don't know why I'm here," he stammered. He looked at her, his eyes full of a desperate, pleading confusion. To apologize? To ask? What did I do wrong? We were happy, weren't we? In the beginning. This was the final test, the last ghost. Clara stood walking to the window to look out at the city she was helping to remap. "We were," she agreed, her voice soft. "We were happy. And then you saw my mind. And you didn't see it as a partner. You saw it as a resource, as something to be mined, as something to own." She turned to face him. "You didn't do one big thing wrong, Marcus. You made one small wrong choice every single day for years. You chose the vision over the work. You chose the sale over the truth. You did it so many times you forgot who you were, and you forgot who I was." He nodded, tears welling in his eyes. Julian, he's good to you. Julian respects me." Clara said, the distinction clear. "That's all I ever wanted. Respect." Can you help me?" he whispered, the real reason for his visit finally emerging. A word to the prosecutors. A character reference. For old time's sake." Clara looked at him. The king of the world reduced to a beggar. The man who had called her nothing was now asking her for everything. "I can't, Marcus," she said, her voice kind but final. "But, Clara." You were right about me in a way," she said. "You called me a footnote, and that's what you are to me now. A footnote in my story, the past." She turned back to her desk. "And I am only interested in the future. Clara." "Goodbye, Mr. Thorne." The security guard gently but firmly escorted him out. The door clicked shut. Clara stood in the silence of her office for a long moment. Julian knocked and re-entered holding 2 coffee mugs. He handed one to her. "Are you all right?" he asked. Clara took a sip, the warmth spreading through her. She looked out the window at the future. "I am," she said, a real brilliant smile spreading across her face. "I'm finally free." "Good," Julian said, smiling back. "Now, let's go change the world." And just like that, Clara Hayes took back her name, her work, and her future. Marcus Thorne's empire built on a lie crumbled to dust, and he became the one single thing he accused her of being, a nothing, a footnote in her story. Clara went from being the ghost in the machine to the woman who ran the machine. Her story is a powerful reminder: never let anyone define your worth. Never let anyone call you nothing, because the person they are dismissing might just be the architect of the very world they live in. Your value isn't determined by their vision, it's proven by your work. What did you think of Clara's revenge? Was it justice, or was it just business? Was Serafina's reaction priceless, or what? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If you love this story and want to see more dramas like this, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you never miss a single story. We'll see you in the next one.